good evening and welcome to the Definitive Debates. My name is Mark Snyder, and this is sponsored by Snyder Stoughton, the column every week in the Stoughton Journal, and also Stoughton News on Facebook. Jeffrey Pickett will be asking the questions. Jeff, of course, is the news and program director of WSMAC, the Stoughton Media Access Corporation. And you can watch this on Comcast Channel 8 and Verizon Channel 28. It's Comcast Channel 9 and Verizon Channel 28. You'll back that up and we'll erase that and delete it, make it look real nice. No, we won't. Okay, we have with us today 4 folks that'll be debating. 2 folks are pro-recall, 2 are anti-recall. And here are the rules that we're going to go by. There'll be a 60-second introduction period for each candidate. Each question that will be asked by Jeff, they'll have 60 seconds to answer, and there'll be a 30-second rebuttal for anybody who wants to get in on the conversation. And at the end, there'll be an outside closing statement for also a minute. So that's the parameters. We have Zach Castle. He'll be doing the timekeeping, and he'll be giving the folks warnings about the times. And that's the way we're going to do it. So we'll start with the introduction. We did a little card picking earlier, and the anti-recall side will go first, and then the recall side will start with Mark Zamanian.
Thank you, Mark. So I got involved in the no recall effort because I asked myself, what is really going on here? This is not about indiscretions by David Souza, Peter Brown, or Bob Cohn. This is about power, misdirection, and downright intimidation. Intimidation by Bob O'Regan and Michael Sullivan and the entire recall group. This is a coup, a hostile takeover. Plain and simple. No laws have been broken by these selectmen. No ethics violations were committed. Judge Michael Ricciuti, a Superior Court judge, supported the actions of these men in his decision. This is the truth. No argument from the recall supporters holds water. If there had been any illegalities, where's the investigation? Where are the charges? The state police? The recall is doing something for Stoughton, however. It's tearing this town in half. We need to end this, and we need to end it now. I ask for your vote for no recall, and thank you.
Peter? Peter Buckley is next.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Jeff, for having us here tonight. I'm going to make this very short and simple. Again, my name is Peter Buckley. I live in Precinct 7. I've been in this town for 51 years. Basically, my whole reason for not voting for the recall is that, in my opinion, a recall should only be justified in time of crisis. Everything that's been spelled out to us, and especially into the affidavit, there is no crisis here. A recall election is a costly event. It divides the town, like Mark has alluded to, and it causes great tension within the town and dissension. It's something that really cannot be going forward. We're 4 months away from a major election, or an annual election rather, and this is something basically that can wait for that time. Thanks.
And Pam Carr, you're next.
Hi, thank you, Jeff and Mark, for having us. Michael Horan and I are here to represent the recall side. And to say we're pro-recall is not necessarily true in this situation. I think a recall is warranted, but nobody really wants to have a recall vote. But the reason that Stoughton First and some of the people that we are representing on our side believe that a recall is important in this case is because it's not just about some of the things that we've heard, but it's more about a pattern of behavior that has become acceptable and commonplace with the current Board of Selectmen and its makeup. We're concerned for many reasons that you see in the affidavit about the current selectmen upholding their oaths to uphold the charter and their fiduciary duty to the town. And that is why we support the recall of David Souza, Peter Brown, and Robert Cohn. Thank you.
And next is Michael Horan.
Michael Horan, excuse me, town meeting rep, Precinct 5, member of the Stoughton Housing Authority. Let me start with some of the reasons why I did not get involved. It's not because I'm part of some kind of conspiracy attempting to take over the town. It's not because I'm part of a shadow government, a member of an elite group, a member of special people. It's not because I'm a terrorist or evil, to cite just some of Chairman Seuss's labels for us. We've already heard about divisiveness. That kind of toxic language is one of the reasons why I got involved, because that's actually what's created and perpetuated divisiveness in this town. Add to that the members of the board's failure to do their fiduciary duty in protecting us from costly lawsuits and, in fact, encouraging them. Their neglect of key issues in town in favor of pursuing personal vendettas. The mockery they made of due process in both hiring and firing town managers, which resulted in a kind of musical chairs in that position. And lastly, preventing certain members of the board from expressing themselves and from performing their personal responsibility and representing their constituents.
Okay, thank you. So now we have the two groups here. We have the Stoughton First group, which is for the recall, and the Citizens Against the Recall, which is opposing it. And now Jeff will take over. You're going to talk a little bit about the recall? And
Sure.
then the questions?
So the recall election is taking place Tuesday, December 5th, 2017 here in Stoughton. And as you heard from the opening statements, it's involving 3 of the 5 members of the current Board of Selectmen, the chairman, David Souza, the vice chairman, Bob Cohn, and member Peter Brown. And there are 3 candidates who are challenging the 3 sitting selectmen, and each of the 3 candidates are individually challenging a selectman. Christine Howe is challenging David Souza, Peter Brown is being challenged by Rick Hill, and Bob Cohn is being challenged by Steve Cavey. And Bob Cohn's seat expires April 2018, Peter Brown's seat expires April 2019, and David Souza's seat expires April 2020. If the recall is successful, those candidates would be serving the remainder of those terms which I just mentioned. We could talk a little bit about the voting process towards the end when you wrap up, Mark, but for now, safe to say let's get into some questions.
Before you do that, just to remind people that on November 15th, we'll be back here live with those 6 candidates. So if you want to get a view on their views, tune in that night.
All right. So the first question, just to kind of build off of what was being talked about in the opening statements, I know there's been a lot of discussion that the April 2018 election is just 5 months away, and one of the selectmen who's being recalled is going to be up for election in April 2018. So should there be an urgency to have a recall when you could potentially flip the board in April from its current 3-2 majority, which we find today?
So I guess the Citizens Against the Recall would respond, whoever wants to respond to that question.
Okay, thank you. I'll take it. No, there should not be a recall. You're correct. We had in April of 2017 a legal voting procedure in which Michael Sullivan and David Souza were elected. As you mentioned, Bobby Cohn is up for re-election, as is Bob O'Regan. And I think that if both sides have an issue with something that's going on, they should be voting in April. The recall process should be kept for true indiscretions, illegalities. Where are the illegalities? Where are the charges? Where are the state police? None of those exist here. In my opinion, this is about Michael Hartman and the ending of Michael Hartman's contract and the legal ending of Michael Hartman's contract, which Judge Ricciuti agreed with in his decision.
Okay. Pro recalls.
Yes, that's the Stoughton First side. Who would like to go first?
I'll start.
Okay, Michael.
2 quick reasons for going ahead with the recall now are that, first of all, what's passed is prologue. And if we look at the last 5 months, it's 5 months, I believe, until the election. If we look at the last 5 months and the continued acts of misconduct, negligence, et cetera, being perpetrated by the members being recalled, it's our opinion that they can wreak untold damage during the next 5 months. Secondly, as I indicated earlier, one of the things that's going down is that certain members of the board are being precluded from doing their duty as members. They're not being permitted to review contracts. They're not being permitted to do what the charter explicitly tells them they have to do. That's it. Those are 2 reasons.
Does anybody have a rebuttal? Anybody want to add to anything to?
Yeah,
what's
I'll
been
add
said?
something to that, Mark. As Mr. Horan said over here, he alluded to the fact that this is long overdue and it cannot wait till April for an election. But I don't understand why it's so long overdue. Where is the town in such a deficit right now that it cannot wait till April? It's going forward. The town is moving forward. We're not in a financial crisis. The work is getting done, and as a matter of fact, things have gotten done that have not been able to get done under the old tenure of the old town manager.
Anybody else have a rebuttal?
Well, I'd like to just say that, the April 19 election will change one person on the board, but changing one person on the board won't change the pattern of behavior that has been going on with the current board. And it's not about flipping the board majority. I know that there is this us versus them mentality, which is absolutely not what it's about. Nobody wants to take over like this is my guys and this is your guys. It's about getting enough people in there that have the town's best interests at heart. And I do actually believe that there have been many damages. Sorry.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
So April is actually about 2 candidates, Bob O'Regan and Bobby Cohn. If anybody wants change in this town, they need to come out and vote at those times. We are talking about positive in this town. We're talking about a $6 million savings in the bond rating. We're talking about a savings for the elderly with the tax for trash pickup. There are countless things that this board has done in a positive manner.
Anybody else?
Quick correction on the upcoming election. That's Steve Cavey will be up against Mr. Collin in April.
Said that.
That's
Well, Bob
No, but Bob is
O'Regan,
up for-
his
Oh, I'm
term is
sorry,
up
right.
as
Term
well.
is up too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
So I would just like to add that, some of the positive things that have come out recently in Board of Selectmen meetings as the department heads have come out and kind of done their presentations about what's going on. These are projects that have been started long before the current town manager or the interim town manager. These are projects that have been spearheaded by the town manager that was in office before the current interim town manager. So for this board and that interim town manager to take credit for that is wrong.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll take that, Mark, on that one. No, that is wrong, because the borrowing package that just came about, that the interim town manager, that was not started by the former town manager, that came to fruition with the arrangement of the new interim town manager, which is going to be a huge cost savings to the town. As far as what you were saying about, you're right, the attitudes of the board members just by one seat, even switching, as you want to say, if the tides have turned on that, it's not going to change the attitudes of the players that are still remaining there, but it's going to be all 5 that have the problem.
Anybody else? 30 seconds goes by quickly.
It does.
Yeah, so you got to kind of really talk fast.
Speed talk.
All right, the next question is going to go to Stoughton First Group.
So I'd like to have both groups talk about the concept of taking your vote away, because it's been a concept that's been shared in advertisement, mostly by the anti-recall side. But I'd like you to address about your opinion on how you see that statement about how the recall is taking our vote away. Don't take our vote away.
Okay, I'll take that one because I really don't think the recall is taking anyone's vote away. If anybody doesn't think that these selectmen should be recalled, all you have to do is vote again. And I don't have the exact date of it, but I believe Chairman Sousa actually said the same words when he decided to question the funding for the library and wanted to bring that up at a Board of Selectmen meeting to see if that could go back to town meeting. I believe he said, what's the problem with voting again if you believe in it? So if you believe in it, you can vote for them again. I also believe that it's not taking anyone's vote away. to have a recall election. However, as someone myself personally who voted for Michael Sullivan in this past election, I do feel like my vote has been taken away because he has not had a chance to perform any of the duties of office because he has been shut down entirely. He did not even have a chance to meet the interim town manager before he was required to vote on his contract. So I believe that the majority of the people have had their vote taken away who voted for Michael Sullivan.
And who's going to handle it for you guys?
I'll take a mark on that. It's a difficult question to answer on that one. Do people feel slighted that their vote didn't make a difference? I wouldn't say so much as to being taken away, but did it make a difference? And did it make enough difference for this not to warrant a recall? It wasn't so much that it was taken away. What it is the people made a choice in our annual election. That choice should be upheld for 1 year. Again, I'll go back to the whole thing about a recall. A recall is in a time of crisis. Just because you don't like the people that were elected into the office, who have done nothing wrong, and spelled out by the affidavit and the 4 points in the affidavit, they're unfounded. So basically, there is no violation of anything there. So in a way, your vote wasn't taken away. It just basically didn't count.
Anybody have a rebuttal on that?
The argument here seems to be less about whether this particular recall is justified or whether recalls in general are justified. And I'd point out that in Massachusetts, the recall goes back to 1631. It's 11 years after Plymouth Rock. It survived for over 300 years for a very good reason. Not all laws and statutes and regulations do. It's tried and true, and I do agree, it's meant for times of crisis. This is not something that any of us have come to easily, nor is it personal. It's not a question of not liking someone. Sorry.
Anybody else with a rebuttal? Go ahead, Mark.
Just real quickly, Pam had said that she felt her vote was taken away in April of this year, but she had the right to vote, and she had the right to vote under normal circumstances. A recall forces people who don't normally come out to have to come out again and vote again, and I don't feel that's fair. The people spoke. They spoke for Michael Sullivan and they spoke for David Souza in April, and that should stay for that year.
Anybody else?
The fact of the matter is that that's kind of a moot point because the recall election is happening. So whether you think it's fair that it happened or that if you voted in April you shouldn't have to vote again for this election, it is happening. So I don't think that's a point of argument.
You're absolutely correct, Pam. It is happening. That's why we need the people to get out.
Anybody else?
Two other quick points. First of all, I think it's noteworthy that more people signed on in support of the recall than voted for any of the candidates who are being recalled in recent elections. And secondly, what Pam's getting at here, and I think it bears repeating, is that our votes are being basically abrogated by the fact that those board members who represent us, particularly Mr. O'Regan and Mr. Sullivan, are not being permitted to engage in those activities that the charter requires that they do, eliminating their vote and therefore our vote.
We're going to do something in the next question. We're going to extend the rebuttal time to 45 seconds.
Yeah, we just feel it's too short.
I think it's too short. So we're going to extend it for the next question. And the next question will be headed toward the citizens against the recall.
I would like each side to be able to discuss why your three candidates, or in your case, the three incumbents, are the best fit to serve on the board. Because ultimately, that's who voters will be weighing in on December 5th.
Can I take it?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, let's talk about that. Let's talk about public safety. They've added 12 new firefighters, 9 patrol officers. They've added a second ambulance to our fire department, actually making that service profitable by some changes in the billing policy. They've begun the sale of town properties. Those town properties were a tax liability. Those town properties generated $800,000 just in the few short sales that we've had. The implementation and installation of the LED lighting on our streets. They jump-started the Stall Glen Echo project, working with the DEP to streamline the costly surveying process, saving the taxpayers $400,000. That property, just so you folks know, was bought in 2011. They improved the bond rating, saving us $6 million. The senior tax fee for trash removal is reduced by 25%.
Thank you. And now the other side.
I think it's important that we were invited here to argue about why to recall these 3 selectmen and not why to vote for the candidates who are up for recall. So I know that there is going to be opportunities for Steve Cavey, Rick Hill, and Christine Howe to argue their own points against the ones, or to argue against candidate to candidate. This debate is to be reasons for recall and against recall, not necessarily for candidate. I believe those are 2 separate questions on the ballot, and I believe that there'll be 2 separate questions that the voters will have to decide for themselves.
In all fairness, though, if you vote to recall and yet, let's just for instance say, we'll take David Souza's election. You vote in favor of his recall, but then don't vote for the second question, and he ends up getting back in, what was the point of the recall? I mean, you have to, am I wrong? Like, don't you,
You're
you have
not
to
wrong
support...
in that that's what it is, but for tonight's purposes, our purpose to be here was to vote pro-recall and anti-recall, not pro-candidate or anti-candidate, and I believe that our candidates, or the candidates who are running against Sousa, Brown, and Cohn can speak for themselves to that. I'm not a representative of a candidate, I'm a representative of Stoughton First and the group that is looking to recall the 3 selectmen.
Good point.
Okay.
Any...
I'll have, and I'll put it in simpler terms, and Pam's correct on that one, and I have the same sentiment on that. It's basically we're here to argue basically why this recall is here, and why we're against it, why you're for it. I'll make it short and simple on that. It's not for any one candidate. I'm in favor of all of them, just for the fact because they were elected to the office in the right process, and they should be afforded that just the courtesy to fulfill their term. It's not like they can have, just because you don't like how they talk to people or anything like that on the board or to anybody else in response to how they've been talked to, you get over that. You get over that, the job is getting done, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, you got to let it go to its natural process.
I'd just like to rebut to that in the fact that I do believe that they were elected in a correct process, and I also believe that the group behind the recall is following a correct process that's laid out in our charter. If we believe that they are actually not upholding the oath that they have taken to uphold our charter, if we believe that there have been violations to that, which we have hundreds of documents for backup for, then we are following the exact process that is laid out that we are allowed to go through in order to recall them. It's not our duty to allow them to just continue what they're doing, and it's not about us just not liking what they're doing.
Go again. I'll go one more time. You're right, they did follow the process to the town charter. If you read the town charter, the only requirements to have a recall are the signatures and an affidavit. It doesn't state what has to be in the affidavit. It doesn't even state that it has to be, you can just put allegations into something as they did, and you got a recall. I think it's flawed in that way. There should be more in the change of the town charter to specify what is a reason for a recall, and it should give examples of that. It doesn't in the town charter. It just says, like I said, you submit an affidavit, you get your signatures, you have a recall.
You have to be careful with changing the charter in that regard, because the courts have already determined that you don't have to. I think that it was the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts that said you don't have to specify, so I'd be wary about changing the charter in that regard. And this does go beyond simply not liking the way the candidate or the sitting board members speak, the way they address us. I know we'll get into many more specifics, but it's not so easily brushed off as the endless stream of insults directed at us by one particular member of the board.
Anybody else?
I
All five
can't.
should be recalled.
You know, this is simply about Michael Hartman. I don't see any other thing. I believe, as Peter Buckley stated, that the charter is flawed. It's far too generalized. If Michael Hartman were to pass away, we would need a 4-to-1 vote to have him removed as town manager, according to the way they're reading the town charter. I don't see that as something that's positive. I see that as something that is flawed and needs to be fixed.
Anybody else?
I would just like to come back to that again, to the point that I came back to before, where we were saying, is it fair that they need to vote again on December 5th? At this point, it doesn't matter whether it's fair. The point is, we have gone through the process that we need to go to. If you don't agree with what the charter says and that the charter is flawed and it should have different things to support a recall, then that's a completely different question as to what we're dealing with right now. And I would also like to, in my 15 remaining seconds, say that this recall is absolutely 100% not just about the dismissal of the former town manager. It's about a pattern of behavior, and that is just one glaring example of what has happened.
We'll have to.
Well, if that's the case, then all 5 should be recalled.
Right.
I don't believe so. Mr. Michael Sullivan has only been on the board since April and had nothing to do with the dismissal of Hartman at all. So there's no reason that he should be recalled. Not to mention that he can't, because the process was started within his first 3 months in office,
So wasn't
which
David
precludes
Souza?
him. He's been in office before.
Doesn't matter. He was
So-
duly elected.
And
But by your explanation of process, it doesn't matter if they did or did do anything. You just says, all we need is the signatures
Right.
and an affidavit to spell out allegations only.
that is all
Simple
we
as
need
that.
to start the recall, to have the recall election be successful and to let our residents know what it is that they're up against. We also have hundreds of documents and examples to back up everything that we have claimed.
Then why haven't they been produced? Because nobody in this town has even seen one of them that have been looking for information. Not one person has come. We've asked. I've asked.
What is it that you're looking for that hasn't been produced?
The documentation.
Everything that backs up these 4 points in the affidavit. We
Okay.
haven't seen one piece of evidence to it. Not one. And it's been asked many times. So if you have all this evidence, bring it out.
So, well, if you would,
Maybe it'll change my mind.
If you have followed Stoughton First, which is our Facebook group, which is totally welcome for anybody to come to like, it's a page, you can like it, you can comment on the posts. We have been posting documents, we have been posting reasons for it, and just starting as of
But
yesterday.
nothing to justify these 4
As of
points.
yesterday, you will find, or as of this morning, you will find that there is a post that explains what we consider the cost of the violation for fiduciary duty that's mentioned in there.
What was the violation
as
of
well
for
as our
fiduciary
ad
duty?
that was in today's Penny Saver explains a list of costs that have been incurred by this board that is not actually taking
There's 5 people on that board, remember?
at this point, there's really 3 people on that board because they're
Okay.
the only ones that have a voice and they're the only ones that vote for anything.
And why is this information only coming out yesterday and today when it's been asked for since the summer?
The information has been coming out
Oh.
over time.
But not answering these questions.
Mr. Buckley, I've been answering a number of these questions day in, day out.
You've been
So-
answering them, but you're saying you have documentation. Well, what do you see in this
Where's the
documentation?
documentation?
Let's look at the affidavit.
Sure.
Number 2, that David Souza, et cetera, have acted improperly in performance of office.
Evaluation.
Number 2 was the evaluation of the town manager.
Evaluation of the town manager. The town manager, by Chairman Sousa's own express declaration in the hour-long discussion that he had on SMAC not that long ago, was that he deliberately did not perform the evaluations. That was a willful and intentional act on his part. He freely admitted to it. There's no way around that.
That's not true at all.
No, that is true.
No,
I'm
there's
sorry,
actually a
it
text out
isn't.
there
Right.
that came from Mr. O'Regan asking the board to stall the evaluation
That's correct.
process
If you look-
and never came back to ask it to be re-put back on the agenda again.
It was
You're
Mr.
talking
O'Regan
about what
who
you've
tabled
heard and
it.
seen. We have the email in the text, rather.
And you can
Do
look
you
at-
have
Have you
documentation
produced-
saying
Yes,
your
it's on-
Have you produced that
Whatever the-
document?
I
No one
haven't
asked for it.
I don't have it.
Oh.
I thought
But
you just said
my
you
ins-
have the
the people's
document.
There is a
intent
document.
There is a document.
Yeah, there is a document.
Yes.
But you can't
Why
produce
is it okay? You
Not
can't,
at
you
this
can't
moment, but
produce
I can
it?
produce
We're
it.
asking
Okay.
you for documentation. You're saying these
I
men
have the
should be
documentation.
recalled. Number 2
Throw it up
was
to the
failure
camera
to
and say, tell me
evaluate
where
the
they
town
have it.
manager. Listen,
It would be about this tall if I brought it with me right
Michael
Then it should have been.
Hartman didn't know that his responsibilities in this town and the effect he was having on this town wasn't negative, it was very negative. And if he didn't know that, for 3 years, we heard from the board requesting information from Michael Hartman, requesting documentation, and it was ignored. Personally, 12 times I called his office to discuss a water problem in my precinct, which is Precinct 1. And 12 times I was ignored categorically. I called Stephen Astis once on a Wednesday, and I saw him Thursday evening to discuss that problem. That is how a town manager should respond.
This is not in any wise a referendum on Mr. Hartman's performance or Mr. Anastas's qualifications.
It's in the
I agree with
affidavit,
you on
sir.
Can I speak,
Yeah,
please?
one person at a time.
Absolutely.
On that one.
No, it's not in the affidavit. There's nothing in here about Mr. Hartman's performance, and it's not an attempt
Failure to evaluate the town manager.
Yes,
That's
that's not
on the
Mr.
board.
Hartman's performance, that's Mr. Seuss's performance, Mr. Brown's performance, etc. The
Mr.
failure to
O'Regan's
evaluate, you
and Mr.
suggested
O'Regan.
that he should have known. What that means, I'm not sure. The fact is, by not performing this is the key point here. By not performing these evaluations, the board set itself up for a lawsuit. This lawsuit is very expensive already. It's going to get a lot more expensive. Had they simply followed the right procedures, there would be no case. The fact is, there is a case. The court has said that at time of pleadings that there are grounds to continue with this case. We're paying through the nose. We're paying even as we speak right now. We're going to continue to pay a lot more, probably
What are
in
we
six
paying?
figures.
Hold on.
$26,000 to date, and the sky's the limit.
Who's paying for that?
The taxpayers of the town.
It's on the insurance policy.
The insurance policy covers $10,000, and we've already
No,
paid.
that's our
our deductible.
liability.
That's our deductible.
What does the
That's our
insurance policy
deductible.
cover?
Public officials liability insurance.
All
What does
of
it
it?
cover? Yeah.
No.
No.
Not intentional.
Willful
cover
and intentional.
negligence.
So
But it hasn't been proven
Judge
that.
It hasn't
Ricciuti's
been
decision
proven, but
was
they've set
irrelevant?
themselves up for this, and this is why we're continuing to pay lawyers. This isn't a question of whether Mr. Hart. I don't care about Mr. Hartman. I don't know the man. He's not coming back. There is no attempt here to bring him back. You know, that's another myth.
We'll see about that.
No, just let him go.
The fact is,
Let him speak.
it has nothing to do with Mr. Hartman. It has to do with the fact that they set themselves up. They gave grounds for a continuing lawsuit, which we're paying through the nose and we're going to continue to. Had they simply followed procedures, had they done what they're supposed to do, even if it's a headache, they could have had their cake and eaten it too. We wouldn't have Mr. Hartman, and we wouldn't be faced with the lawsuit.
Anybody? Mark?
So Bobby Kahn spoke to town council today, and the 16,000 in the advertisement was wrong. It's 4,000 currently. As far as having town council at the Board of Selectmen meetings, that's part of the retainer. The accusation that town council put together a public relations statement there was no charge to that, I am told, by Bobby Cohn. Every single thing that was on that ad today is false. I mean, if we're going to have a fair debate, let's have a fair debate. Let's produce documentation. I can have the documentation tomorrow morning on the text from Bob O'Regan.
All right, well, do you want to go to the next question?
Sure.
Okay, so the next one is going to be going to the to the Stoughton First group.
Okay. I'd like to have both groups take on the June 29th Board of Selectmen meeting and July 20th Board of Selectmen meeting, and to refresh everybody's memory at home, those are the meetings. The June 29th one is about a 15-minute meeting where the Board of Selectmen voted to appoint Bill Rowe as interim town manager, and the July 20th meeting was the meeting where Mr. Anastos was appointed interim town manager. And you could argue that these two meetings are what served as the impetus for the start of this recall process. So I'd like to get both sides' take on those proceedings.
And Stoughton First is first on this.
I'd start with the July 25th meeting. I think that was a 6-minute and 8-second meeting at which no public comment was allowed, and during which one selectman who had not had time to read a contract for a position paying $170,000 a year and managing a multi-million-dollar business was not permitted to read the contract. One of the selectmen actually said, "Would you give him 10 minutes?" when he made a motion for the same. He later voted against doing that for whatever reason. Mr. O'Regan also asked for time to interview the candidate publicly. That was struck down. And probably most important in terms of legal issues in play, Mr. O'Regan said that he is obligated by the town charter to review the credentials of the candidate. No such thing happened. At the December 15th meeting, Mr. Sousa had, sorry.
I'll take on that one. And as far as I'll group the two meetings together. That process was followed just like it was with the interim town manager before Mr. Hartman came in. When Mr. Feaster was appointed as interim town manager, same process. But it wasn't these three gentlemen that had to do with it. I think Mr. O'Regan had a big part of that one. They came up and this is their candidate. That's who they wanted, that's who they voted. Same process. So I don't see it any way. If they're going to screen this process wrong, practice what you preach. Simple as that.
I have to ask a question because I'm not as familiar with that, but when there was a contract for Mr. Feaster, was two members of the board not allowed to read that contract because it showed up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon just before the meeting? And when they were asked for
I don't know if with that,
were
but
they
very
asked for a
similar.
10-minute recess and then denied a 10-minute recess? I believe the documents are supposed to be provided to the members of the board within an extended time frame beforehand, not 3 in the afternoon. And I'm sorry
Everybody
you
got
didn't
the
get a chance
documents
to
at the
read
same
it.
time.
I may beg to differ on that, but even if they did, I believe there is a determined amount of time that they need to get them in, and should someone not be able to read it within 20 minutes before the meeting, they should be allowed a 10-minute recess to do it. So
Okay.
I know that there's been parallels that have been tried to be drawn in between past history and present history. I'm personally not concerned about past history. I'm concerned about present history.
But when it comes to process is about history. You follow the process. And that's what it comes down to. And it's not imaginary lines that are being drawn. That's what happened.
So you're saying, where you said you follow the process. So if they didn't follow the process,
No,
when
what I'm
they
saying
appointed
is
Joe
they did the
Feaster-
same process that you're accusing these people of following and not having a process.
Well, we're not
or
actually
following
sure
a
if we are,
process.
because did they actually, where was the contract presented to the board? Was the entire board allowed to read the contract before they had to vote on it?
Yeah.
Was everyone on that board allowed to meet the
Like I
candidate
said,
at
very
all?
similar circumstances.
Well, similar and exactly the same are two different things.
no, not necessarily.
Mark,
but-
you want to?
Yeah, I do. Actually, so what you're talking about where Bob did not feel he had the time, it was Peter Brown who made the suggestion that they take a 10-minute recess. Michael Sullivan affirmed that. He repeated that. Bob O'Regan was asked, look, if we give you the 10 minutes, is it going to change your mind? And he says, no. So his intent was, and that's why the board moved forward with the vote, because Bob O'Regan made it plain and simple that regardless of what he read in that information, he was going to vote against Stephen Astis's appointment as interim town manager.
I still maintain that whether or not Mr. Brown or Mr. Sousa believed they knew what the outcome of that vote was going to be, that Mr. Sullivan and Mr. O'Regan, as equal members of that board, have the right to read the contract and know what they are voting on before they vote it. And that was Mr. Brown's suggestion.
And they
It
were
was,
afforded,
and
everybody
you're-
was
And Mr.
afforded the
Brown
same
then
amount of
said,
time.
you know what, forget it, because you're just gonna say what you're
No,
gonna
Bob
say.
O'Regan said it's not necessary because I know what my vote's going to be. There's a difference.
He said it's not necessary?
I
He
don't,
says, I'm not going to change my mind.
I-
Those were his words. To me, that says, I'm not changing anything. I don't really need the time.
Which
It
is
was Michael Sullivan as well as Peter Brown.
Which
They
is
both.
which is akin to what Mr. Sousa said when he explained that there was no reason to do the evaluations because he was going to be damned no matter whether he did them or not.
No, not
and
true.
this is
it was
the
Mr.
same.
O'Regan who said,
is the
let's
same-
hold off on the evaluations, not Mr. Sousa.
This
I would
watch
also,
the smack tape.
yeah.
I did. I
Secondly,
watched them
in
in
regard
detail
to
a number of times.
whether this is what's transpired in the past, I'm with Pam. I'm relatively new to town history, unfortunately, but I don't find that this two wrongs make a right argument suffices in any regard. If something is wrong, it's wrong. It's not suddenly right because it was wrong in the past. It's a wrong that should be corrected now. We can debate whether it's wrong or not, but let's not get into this is the way we've always done it. We've done it the wrong way in the past, so that justifies doing it
I totally
wrongly now.
disagree with that because what you're doing, I mean, that's just dancing around it. Basically what you did, they knew it was wrong then, but
Who
now
is
they're
that-
going to come.
Who is they?
The people that put Mr. Feaster into the job then.
I
Bob
wasn't-
O'Regan was part of it. I know you weren't here. That's my point. You weren't here. Okay? We were.
So I shouldn't be pushing a recall when I see something that I
No,
consider
I'm not
wrong
saying, what I'm
now.
saying is
Michael, what
this.
he's saying
Hold on,
is
hold
the-
on. What I'm saying is this. The process. They're screaming process. Then follow it and be consistent with it. Don't make your wrong over here and then point the finger to somebody else and say, you're doing it wrong when you did it wrong over here.
I didn't do it wrong over there.
'Cause you
I'm
weren't here.
Exactly. So I'm pointing the finger now.
I
You
think
can, but I'm saying,
Thank you.
don't scream about process when the process, whether it's you or anybody else on your side, did the same thing. And now they're screaming the process is wrong over here. You can't do that. You
So
cannot
if
do
the
that.
process is wrong in another year, should we just throw up our hands and say,
No, the only thing I agree with you on is change it. Change it so it's right.
that's what we're
That's what we're trying to do.
No,
But
you're
don't
trying
sit
to
there and
recall
scream that they
three
followed a
men.
wrong process when they did the exact same
well,
thing.
to be clear, the only person screaming right now is you. We're trying to have a discussion on what we
Okay.
disagree on. And
Then let me say it a little calmer. Don't scream there's a bad process when they followed the same process before. History will dictate itself, okay, unless you change it. Unless you change that process, okay, history will always be what it was here to here.
It's not a question of changing the process. It's a question of adhering to the process.
Thank you. You just proved my case. That's right. You got to adhere to the process.
Right.
If you think it's right over here, then it should be right over here.
I didn't think it was right over there.
How do you know? You weren't here.
Exactly. You're setting up a straw
Okay.
man.
So my point is this: I'm talking about in general, not just you, but it's the process that your group is saying you did not follow. So follow the right process.
Folks, I think
recall isn't
let's,
the right
let's cut
process.
that right here, because I think we're going into a tangent and banging our heads here. So let's go to the next question, and this one's going to be aimed towards Stoughton First. Go ahead.
So I'd like to discuss the differing opinions on the judge's decision in the case of Michael Hartman's injunction against the town of Stoughton. The injunction was denied, but there's been two schools of thought on is exactly what that decision means and how it either validates or does not validate the current majority of the Board of Selectmen's position on not renewing his contract.
Stoughton First.
So the judge in this case denied Mr. Hartman's request for an injunction. It had nothing to do with the case going forward. He's still entitled to claim monetary damages. And one of the key points here is that the defense brief, the brief submitted by the Board of Selectmen's own attorneys, claims at one point that this case will be dismissed upon the pleadings as it goes forward. That did not happen. That means that, that despite the denial of the injunction, the case goes forward. Secondly, the anti-recall people have tried to make the case that when the judge said Mr. Hartman did not suffer irreparable harm, that somehow has to do with the fact that the board didn't do any harm. The exact opposite is true, and they're misconstruing that argument. There's no irreparable harm because the harm can be repaired, and both his own attorneys, the Board of Selectmen's own attorneys, and the judge himself had said that he is perfectly free to seek to have those damages repaired monetarily. So it had the claim of irreparable damages having nothing to do with the board. It's just plain factually wrong.
Who's going on this side?
Let me take it. Let me read a part of the judge's decision. This is in the discussion part of Judge Ricciuti's decision. Hartman, and these are his words in quotes, cannot show a likelihood of success on the merits and is therefore not entitled to a preliminary injunction. At the end of his decision, he also said nothing shown by the plaintiff, i.e. Michael Hartman, justifies the court in overriding the town's choice as to its management. This is about the town's choice. The people of Stoughton had a contract with Michael Hartman that lawfully ended according to Massachusetts state law. We chose not to renew that contract. So the threat of further litigation, in my opinion, is nothing more than that. It's just a threat.
It's not a threat.
It's an absolute
It's
threat.
actually happening.
It's an absolute threat.
It's not a threat. It's reality.
Where is the lawsuit?
It's proceeding right now.
Do we have anything in the courts right now?
Yes,
Yeah,
you
but there's a
do.
civil
We
suit
do.
going on
Okay.
here.
I mean, to
Well,
call
we're
this
going
a
to find
threat
out what that is.
is patently
and
absurd.
furthermore,
And just
what is
another
it? $10,000
example.
is our liability?
Another
No, it's,
sorry, say that again?
We have a $10,000 deductible, do we not?
It's already been met.
Yeah.
Do you know what this
So
case is
there's-
going to cost?
Deductible. You understand what that
Oh, but
means,
when,
right?
Yes, and if it's proven that this is a case of intentional, willful,
proven.
yes, if it's proven, that's not a threat. This is reality.
If it's proven.
Or if they settle. You want to tell me they're not going to settle?
They may in fact
And
settle.
what
I
do you
don't
think
know.
that
I'm
number
not an
would
attorney.
be? You want to
so-
pull a number out of your hat? Just
Nope.
a rough figure?
Nope.
Take a guess.
I
Come
don't.
on.
I have no idea.
Yes, you do.
Throw your hundreds of thousands out there because that is where I'm talking about a threat, okay? Don't threaten us with this. This town had a right to vote, and we did in April.
and you have a right to vote again.
Unfortunately, we do, and we're being forced to vote. Forced to vote because there's a few in this town that have a problem with the way things are going. Take a look at their record. It's a wonderful record, a positive record. Lots of positive things are happening under this current board. I'm sorry if Bob O'Regan and Michael Sullivan are choosing not to participate in that because that's what they're doing.
I'd like to,
They unequivocally vote no regardless.
No,
Doesn't
they do
matter.
not. All those great things you talked about.
Yes.
Did they unequivocally vote no on those issues?
I know they voted no on some of them,
Which
yes.
ones?
Yes, I can't answer that. I don't know which ones.
Because they don't unequivocally
Oh,
vote no.
they do.
No,
It's been
they
3-2.
don't. No,
Consistently.
It's not. It's 3-2 consistently when it comes to matters involving the town manager, the series of town managers appointments.
manager-
Otherwise, it is not 3-2, and that's just it's a blanket falsehood.
That should be put to rest.
I would
We
also
have an
like,
interim town manager.
I would also like to mention that there are, the chair of the Board of Selectmen has been quoted in trying to rescind the funds of the library and was not in favor of the high school project when it first came. He
Not
may
true.
now say that he is in favor of it, but I have been told, in my opinion, people have told me that he was not in favor of it. He wanted to kill that project because it wasn't right for our town. So I do believe that there's no unequivocal no's or yeses. This great project's going forward. Some of the Board of Selectmen that we're trying to recall were not in support of it anyways, so I'm not sure exactly why that's that.
Let me clarify a couple of things. Peter Brown, David Souza, Bob Cohn, we're all in favor of both the high school project and the library project. The library project funding changed, and that's why we were concerned about bringing it back to town meeting. The high school project, any questions that were asked in an effort to ensure that our taxpayers' money was spent wisely in the best possible way it could be.
Anybody else? Pam?
Mr. Sousa went beyond simply asking questions, and he actually had a motion to rescind funding, and then he rescinded the rescission after plenty of pressure. There have been a couple of examples like that where, in regard to the train depot, the library, where you talk about your vote being dismissed. Town meeting represents the voice of the people here. Town meeting voted overwhelmingly in favor of these projects, including the depot, which Mr. Sousa, with his feigned engineering expertise, is now claiming is going to cost, talk about making up numbers, $5 million. And in terms of the library, he also attempted to rescind that, again, abrogating the will of the voters.
Okay. Want to go to the next question?
Sure.
All right,
So
this one over here will go to the Citizens Against the Recall.
all right, likely be our last question too, with time winding down. I'd like to talk about bringing things back a bit. We talked about division in the town, just the tenor of the social media conversation and how you might how you feel the discourse can improve, how you would advise people on your side and the other side to maybe calm things down a bit. Seems to be a lot of keyboard warriors and some keyboard courage out there. So just to talk about the discourse that's been going on.
We both can. You can say it.
Well, I agree with you, Jeff. I think it's been nothing but a slander campaign. I'm deeply saddened. I'm not a Facebook person. Anybody who knows me knows I'm not a huge supporter of social media. I was, by another gentleman, asked to go on and take a look, And frankly, I was saddened by it. As a matter of fact, a good friend of mine, Greg Goldberg, has suggested a town-wide, not mass, but prayer service to bring this town together. We are clearly divided, and it's painful to see this. When this is all over, regardless of which side wins, hopefully we'll be able to be unified again. But the way we're doing things now is sad to me. It's a nightmare.
Well, just to clarify, do you feel that there are people on your side as well as the other side that are guilty of maybe going overboard on,
In fairness to your question, Jeff, I can't answer it because I'm not a Facebook person. I'm not a social media person.
Mr.
So
Buckley,
I
you're
don't
on
know.
Facebook.
I'm sorry.
Sometimes, yes.
Yes.
No, I absolutely do on both sides. Absolutely. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous out there, some of the comments that are being made. In the attacks, the personal attacks is the worst. That's what it really comes out. And again, it's both sides. It's not just one-sided on that. It goes from both sides and on that one. It's just ridiculous. Mark has said it has divided this town. It's divided it considerably. And the people that have been in this town a long time ago, the last time there was a recall in this town, it was a crisis. There was a crisis in this town. Mark, you know as well as I do, you were reporting everything on that. This is worse as far as the social media. The social media wasn't as prevalent back then. It has to stop. That has to stop. And that has nothing to do with an affidavit or the recall. It has to do with the recall, basically. Forgive me on that one. But it's the personal attacks that are coming out. And like I said, it's just both sides.
Let me hear from them.
So I agree that social media has gotten out of hand. I've actually tried to myself step back a bit from it. At the very beginning of this process, I actually had some personal difficulties running into some people, which is why Stoughton First actually came to be, because I did not want just my name out there as the face of it, so I had a target. In order to do that, we made it 100% open and available to everybody, so they know everything that we're talking about, and it's not attributed to just one person. That said, I fully agree that there are comments and there are things coming from both sides. I had a conversation with Lieutenant Bonney in my driveway before this process happened, and he said, I really hope that this doesn't come down to a recall. And I said, you know, I love this town, and I just know we have such a great community and whatever. I can't imagine that it would really turn into such what it has turned into. I really did think that we could all be neighbors and we could all discuss the issues that we have in civil manner and move on from that. And unfortunately, I've been proven wrong in that on many sides. And I still like to believe that this will not completely divide the town. But I did go into this believing that we could actually have disagreements and conversations and come to a conclusion, and at the end of it, shake hands. I still hope that's what happens, and that's that.
I do too. And we want to have a conclusion now. So starting with you, Michael, we're going to go back the other way and just quickly sum up. We have about a minute apiece.
Let me conclude then, in part by addressing your last question, since I didn't get a shot at it. I'd like to apologize for any overstepping on the part of anti-recall people. We've all been guilty of it. I'm sorry, not we all. Both sides have been guilty of it. I haven't seen these gentlemen. So the only thing I've seen from these gentlemen is one humorous post from Peter, which actually made me laugh. Respect that. I've tried not to engage in mudslinging myself, but you are right, and I think the healing process is going to be important. I did respond to somebody's post today saying one thing I'd like to see at the first Board of Selectmen's meeting after the election is that we read Lincoln's second inaugural address, bind the wounds, be gracious to one another, and accept the outcomes. I think that's going to be really important. And I also believe that a fresh slate of candidates is really going to be helpful because, as I pointed out at the beginning, one of the real sources of this division, the recall didn't create the division. The divisions have been there, and they're being exemplified by Mr. Sousa's endless toxic language.
Pam?
Thank you. I would just like to say I wish that during this debate we had actually had a chance to get into more of the actual issues and the affidavit. I know we touched on a few things, but I think we talked a little bit more about some of the stuff that's been thrown back and forth on social media as opposed to really getting into it. We are starting to talk about those things more on Stoughton First. I'd also like to point out that a lot of what's come up tonight is about what has happened in the past and things like that. And myself, I've been here for 17 years, which is not long in terms of being a true Stoughtonite, though it is my new adopted hometown and I'm not leaving anytime soon. But also that there are a lot of new citizens and new residents and new voters who have maybe not come and grown up in Stoughton, but they don't know the past, but they've chosen to invest their futures here. And I think that, you know, we owe it to every resident, whether you're new or old, multi-generational or not, which touch a, I guess I won't have my last thing to say.
You could wrap up with the sentence.
Oh,
Do you
I
want
was
to read
just,
it for you?
no, it's okay. I was just going to say it touches on my last point, which was, Mr. Zamanian brought it up very briefly, that this is an effort bought by few. And I actually know and believe for a fact that that's not true. This us versus them mentality, that there's a small group of people behind the recall because they have a specific agenda, and this is just not true. And so I invite everyone to learn more about both sides of the argument and make decisions for themselves.
Peter?
Thank you.
It's tough to go on what you said. You're right. You're absolutely right. And Michael's right as well. The town needs to be reunited. It needs to go forward. Again, Pam was also correct on this. I wish more was based on the facts here of the affidavit, but the fact remains, and like I said in my opening, was the reason why I'm against this recall for the most part is because I don't think it's warranted. I don't think it's for the reasons stated. I don't think it's worth it for that to put the town through this. But with that being said, it's time. It needs to be. We need to remedy what has been done. And that's by all five board members. And I'm talking about everybody in the town that has gotten involved, social media, all of it wrapped in together. We have to move forward, and it's time that we move forward now. A lot of things are going to be happening in the next couple years. We need some people that are there to make and help bring that forward.
Mark?
I am glad that we were able to agree on one thing tonight. And I think town unity is going to be absolutely key when this is all over. I fully support David Souza, Peter Brown, and Bobby Cohn in their efforts here, the positive efforts. I fully support Steve Anastas and the dramatic improvements we've seen in morale and work efficiency throughout our government departments. We have safer streets, thanks to increased numbers in police and fire department. We have a new high school and a new library being built. These are things these men supported, and we are, as Stoughton, we are on the right track. I know David Souza, Peter Brown, and Bob Cohn love this town. I love this town. I ask you to please support this no recall effort, and I thank you.
I want to thank all of you for coming in tonight.
Thank you.
We only scratched the surface. I wish we had another couple hours, but we don't. I want to thank Jeff for joining me here, and thanks to Michael Hammond, CJ Mullen, Zach Castle, and David Young. The next debate live will be November 15th, and the selectmen candidates will be in. And then don't forget one thing. Vote on December 5th. No matter what side you vote for, vote, because your voice must be heard. Good night, everybody.